One more minute and we will start the webinar. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar this morning. Just to give a little bit of background of what we are planning during the month of October as BATM. So we have decided that the month of October is our technology innovation month, where we will have in total 8 webinars, starting with the first one this morning. So every week for the next 4 weeks, we will have a session on Tuesday and Thursday morning where we invite a technology innovation player out of our industry to present themselves, in order to give all of you a better insight of what is available out there to bring your program to the next level post COVID-19. And this morning we have our first of the series, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome Dennis from Troop. And Dennis, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Pascal. Thanks as well, Sophie, for having me here today. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from chilly Madrid, where we currently have 14 degrees, but that might be maybe warmer than in some of the places where you guys are based. Great to be here again. Actually, Pascal and I, we were just talking earlier. The last visit to Belgium for me was actually in February or in January this year, and where I had the opportunity to participate in one of the events there. And so that was very exciting and great to be able to talking to you today again, giving you an update around what has happened, and maybe there small spoiler alert, or I mean, I guess you were wondering why should you now spend the next half an hour to an hour listening to a startup dealing with in-person meeting planning when no meetings are happening, basically. And there, the spoiler alert as well, maybe you are interested to learn why actually we were managing or were able to grow our customer base from 4 large multinational companies to currently 15 since the beginning of the pandemic. And I want to share with you really what we are doing here, and how do we create a value to these companies, and why do these companies believe in us. And I'll run you through a couple of slides. I want to cover certain elements. I want to first explain a bit like what do we do, why we do it, what do we do it, the kind of the concept for those who haven't heard about us. Then I want to share a bit what we see and how meetings and events planning is changing now in this new environment. And then thirdly, I want to share an example of how actually we are now looking at our own in-person meetings in this new environment we are in this COVID-19 world, with these new kind of factors which are influencing the planning. So that's a bit what I have in mind. If you have any questions, please feel free to maybe post them on the chat. I don't know if I will be able to see it while I'm presenting, but then as well, maybe Sophie and Pascal, you can just interrupt me or if there are any specific questions. Great, thanks. I'll share my screen, and let me. So the first thing actually, before we start, maybe some of you may have heard about us as Troop Travel, and actually we were just doing a rebranding. So now we are called Troop, and the basic reason for this is because we want to stress that we are a technology company, and we have realized that actually with our previous name, Troop Travel, a lot of people were thinking we are a TMC, we're an agency, but no, we are a purely technology company which utilizes technology to optimize meetings and events planning. And let me explain to you a bit why we do what we do. So actually, before founding this company, I was working in management consulting. My work has always been around bringing efficiencies in the way organizations are operating, bringing data-driven approaches in technology and basically creating efficiencies. Now, my last assignment was for a very large global organization, and there are thousands of people around the world. And they were continuously organizing in-person meetings, which were a bit look like this. So there were a couple of people coming from different places from around the world, and sometimes it were smaller meetings, sometimes it were large events with a couple of thousand people, and they were organizing these kind of meetings. Now, their first question they always had was the very basic question of where do we meet? And it was a very simple question if you think about it, but it's actually extremely difficult to answer. And we realized that the way this organization was trying to answer this question was very much driven by personal opinions and as well maybe by preferences. There was no really technology-driven approach in trying to help them in answering that question, but as well actually in kind of planning a meeting. Everything was extremely cumbersome, extremely manual. And then we thought, okay, why wouldn't we kind of be able to use more technology in the whole meeting planning process to basically enable these people who are in charge of organizing meetings or conferences or whatsoever to actually take better decisions throughout the process. And that's kind of where we then started to found Troop Travel at that point, which now is called Troop. And we started to really work on technology there. And then very quickly we've realized, well, actually trying to answer this question of where to have a meeting and then how as well to have it is actually extremely difficult to answer. So we saw that there are plenty of factors influencing decisions around everything within the meeting planning. And in the pre-COVID time, it was very much maybe cost-driven. In our organization, that was as well very much looking about carbon footprint or visa requirements because it was just such a global group. Or there were some soft factors like what's the weather there? What's the experience level there? Which location is maybe the closest to the senior management? So really very, very complex and very, very complicated. And that's why it was basically for the planners at that point extremely difficult to bring all these data points together. And that's why a lot of decisions were based on opinions rather than on real data points. And so we kind of, we understood that challenge and we transformed the challenge basically into a solution based on technology. So we released at that point a platform which actually aggregated all these data points together, which then helped the planner or an executive assistant or whoever would have the need of organizing a meeting to actually take informed decisions throughout the planning process. Now, apparently that what we've realized then when we started to launch that platform, and that was only actually last year in 2019, that's where we launched the first beta version of the technology. We realized that actually there's a lot of interest in what we do. And apparently what we are solving here is a challenge which has not been properly solved or actually even thought about previously. And so that's kind of resulted that with this concept, with the technology, we actually won a lot of awards on the same. And this is quite interesting for us because Leonard, my co-founder, the tall guy whom you see there on the picture, and myself, and we are not from the industry. So we have, as I said earlier, like the management consultancy background on my side, and Leonard has the tech background. And then actually winning these different industry awards, like the Business Travel Show in London, for example. We won an award with Amadeus in Madrid, ACT, which does unfortunately not exist anymore. We won their award in Paris, LAPTA, which was part of GBTA, BCD as well, Focusrite. So really a lot of big awards there for us. It gave us this endorsement of we are doing something which is really, really valuable for the industry. So that was kind of till, let's say, end of 2019. And then as we got into this year, 2020, well, we realized, well, as we all know, things have changed. So since the beginning, actually, I think I had my last business trip in end of February, where I actually went to the Business Travel Show in London again. And then when I came back from there, then basically very quickly here in Spain, we started to be confined at home. And then, well, the rest, you know, that's the time where we are living now. But what we've then realized actually that the question of where do we meet now, if you try to look forward now, of actually how can we as an organization get out of COVID and how can we get relevant in-person meetings back, the question of where do we meet has become an absolute must to ask. While previously maybe not everyone believed in that there is a value of answering this question, because a lot of people or a lot of companies as well, they were looking at meetings and events differently. Now it's really, it's you have to ask it, and not only because you want to drive costs down, no, actually for some other reasons. And those are mainly now these new challenges we have realized, which are now influencing this question. So actually, if you think about an in-person meeting, and again, it doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter whether it's people coming together from all over the world or from maybe different countries within Europe, for example. There are additional data points which are extremely important to take into account. One is on the travel restrictions that today, I mean, let's say most of us, I would assume, the people who are on the call, most of us, we are potentially holding a European passport or a Western passport. So previously, we were able to travel basically anywhere in the world. Well, today it's not the case anymore. I'm holding a German passport. I'm living in Spain. I want to visit team members in the United States. Well, it's very difficult for me to be able to do that actually. The second thing around the health and safety element, that, well, of course, you want to make sure that your travelers are safe, and not only on meetings and events. Any traveler right now, that they, if they do a single business trip, well, you want to ensure that you give them all the data points, all the information, so that their trip is actually safe and that they are safe. So the information around COVID spread, etc., has become very important. So we have addressed these new figures, and what we've then realized since the beginning of the pandemic, that, as I said earlier, that actually our customer base grew from 4 large multinational companies by end of the year, or currently 15. And those are really, I mean, it's actually an interesting fact, because none of them is planning meetings as we speak. I mean, some of them, okay, they actually see that in China, things are getting back. But on a global level, there's very little planning happening. But what those companies have realized is that, well, they have to start moving, and they actually have to get prepared for the moment that meetings and events are possible again. And meetings, even if we again talk about small meetings and regional meetings, etc. So we are actually currently innovating with all of them further on the technology. Very briefly around the customers. So actually today those are, we see, let's say, several industries which seem to be very innovative in that approach, or as well, which actually still have the need of having a lot of in-person meetings right now. So actually today we are serving some of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world, some of the largest companies in fast-moving consumer goods, consulting, energy, and technology. And so actually what we've done now on our side, throughout this working together with our customers over the last couple of months, we have built an enhanced, kind of a new version of the technology, which we are releasing now end of October, which actually addresses the new normal as well, how we like to call it, of meetings and events planning. So really as well, helping you to compare information around COVID spread, around travel restrictions, quarantine, etc., for meetings and events. So something what you, for sure, if you are working in business travel, which you are looking at right now anyways, when you want to empower your travelers so that they have these data points when they do individual trips. Now what we are doing, we are empowering your people to actually, well, to plan meetings in a safe environment, while keep on as well saving costs and reducing carbon footprint. Now, the beauty of this new technology actually is that it fits for all meetings of any size, and not only on size, but as well on location. So it doesn't matter whether you're planning a meeting within a city or maybe within a country. You can plan a meeting within a continent or on a global scale around the world. Let me share a bit now some trends we have seen from our customers, basically, how meetings planning is changing with COVID-19. So addressing kind of the new normal, and there are a lot of things which will stay and which we will have to take into account. The first, the obvious one, I addressed it a bit earlier, is around, well, you want to see the impact of COVID-19 or any other pandemic which potentially may hit us as well in the future again. So you want to see actually infection rates, you want to see travel restrictions. Since we are a technology company and we are a data company, so our first response was actually bringing these data points into the technology. So we actually brought the infection rates into the technology. This is an example of the United States where we can show you the infection rates per state. We have these data from all the countries around the world. It's basically the publicly available data from the Johns Hopkins University, which aggregates a lot of different data points. So this is definitely something very interesting. I'll show you later a practical example how we used it actually in our own planning. Now, travel restriction, again, is something what I mentioned earlier. This is actually extremely difficult to solve. And it's already extremely difficult for your individual travelers. So this is an example which I took from our system to see, okay, where could actually now travelers from Belgium travel to? So there are plenty of countries where you are able to travel to as well. There are quite a number of countries you cannot travel to. But then actually, for example, if the very simple case of you have one traveler in the United States and you have one traveler in Belgium, well, how would that look like? Where could those people actually meet? So what we are doing on our technology side, we are aggregating these restrictions, and then you quickly see, well, if you would want to meet with someone coming from the United States, most of the countries within Europe are actually not possible. So you can go to the UK, potentially Ireland, Italy as well, Belarus, but then as well you have to think about other options, well, maybe Turkey, or maybe somewhere in Asia. So it actually is extremely difficult, and then obviously it becomes more difficult if we add now more people into this kind of group to come together. Another trend which we have seen, specifically on the meetings and events side, is the cost optimization. When you compare business travel with meetings and events, business travel has always been very well managed within companies. We have the policies, we have technology, we have services, etc. Now, when you think about meetings and events, what I've realized when we got into the industry, that a lot of companies are struggling with very basic questions to answer, like how many meetings are you having on a global scale in a year? Well, maybe some companies know the number of large events they have, but how many smaller meetings do you have? So no one is basically able to answer that. And what we've realized now, well, budgets have been slashed and then resources has been cut. So there is now a big pressure on actually people who are managing meetings and events to show the value of their programs. And that's something which we have always kind of helped our customers with, even in pre-COVID time, by basically applying big data analytics and having a flexibility of where to meet. We have amazing case studies where we were continuously able to reduce costs by somewhere around 40% just by considering other destinations. That was really at that point driven by cost or by sustainability elements. Well, today it's actually really driven by risk factors. And maybe just to quickly give some more information here, the interesting thing on these different cases is that there are different factors which would allow you actually to realize these savings. We had some cases where, for example, the first one, Miami, San Jose, in that case, a 5-star hotel in San Jose that was for an incentive trip of one of our large customers was remarkably cheaper than a similar hotel in Miami. So the customer, by moving actually the meeting to San Jose, Costa Rica, was able to really reduce the cost. We have other examples where the travel policy is kind of a key driver. Sometimes the flight component. So it's very, very interesting to run this type of analysis and to be able to run this type of analysis. Two more trends I wanted to share with you. One is around hybrid meetings. And hybrid meetings is something which we have heard now from a lot of our customers, a lot of companies we are talking to, that they see actually a lot of value in running hybrid meetings. So hybrid meetings are these meetings where you have in-person participation, but as well virtual participation. And basically the feedback we have heard is that, well, everyone understands the value of in-person meeting. For us, for example, as a fairly young startup, whenever we went to an event, it was really around the networking, connecting with people. That was the biggest value for us. We hardly ever were sitting in any sessions to learn about certain content. So this now, the networking is very difficult. As we know right now, I don't know whether you're engaged right now or not, so it's as well difficult to present in this kind of a virtual environment, so to say. So I think the value of in-person participation is absolutely clear. But then the value of the virtual participation is that your outreach is remarkably higher. So it's really something what we've seen now with customers, that they say, okay, they had now hybrid meetings. Some pharmaceuticals had some good tests in China actually, and they said they reached 3 or 4 times the amount of people they would normally reach with their conferences. So it's really a good value. So what we've done now on the planning side basically is we brought a virtual participation component into the planning side. So you can actually quickly see, well, how would kind of your data points change if some of your participants would join virtually. And then that's, I think, very, very valuable to look at, especially if you, again, think about the travel restrictions. Well, if let's say the person from the US cannot join in person, in a in-person meeting in Belgium, well, then there is only the option of virtual participation. Related to that is a bit kind of the last trend we see, which is around regional and micro meetings. Now, regional meetings are the ones we start seeing already. And regional meetings are meetings just like here, for example, a couple of different places within Europe coming together, and you try to figure out what are actually good locations to come together. Now, what we've done from a technology point of view, and actually before the pandemic started, is that we brought in alternative transportation methods. So today the technology is able to compare and to recommend the ideal transport method for each participant. Should you rather drive? Should you take the train? Should you fly? You can change that manually as well, but the system is able to run this kind of analysis. And then as well, not only on the cost side, but specifically as well on the carbon footprint side, which is very interesting for a lot of our customers. Now, the same technology allows us actually as well to address kind of a new trend, which we have seen now because of all of us working from home, and potentially some of us, we are actually a bit fed up of only having this virtual, let's say, engagements. So when you actually look at meeting of people who are living around the same city, so for example, colleagues of yours with whom you were sharing an office, but now everyone is working from home. So if people are living normally outside of the city, why would you meet in the center of the city if it's remarkably faster for everyone to meet somewhere else? So this is kind of an interesting trend we see for really these micro meetings, small groups of people, meetings of maybe an hour, 2 hour, or maybe a business lunch or whatsoever. And then you can actually quickly save a lot of time for each of these meetings. And there are a lot of these meetings starting to happening already. So actually it's quite an interesting area to look at as well. Good. Now you may ask yourself, okay, why does this actually matter? And I want to share with you an example of how actually we are looking at meeting or planning an in-person meeting in this current time we're in. And I think that I hope this will be very, very relevant for you, very interesting for you. So a short story again about ourselves. So with the growth I showed you earlier, actually as well, we have seen a growth on a company level on our team side. So actually we were 3 people by end of last year. Today we are 9 people working on this project. And just to give some faces to the team, so those are the people working together with us here on helping these companies actually plan differently, plan better their meetings in the new time. And actually, the interesting thing here is that even myself, I only have met in person around 50% of the team. So the challenge we have internally is that, well, we are in that respect actually fully distributed. You'll see our team we are a virtual company. I'm working here from home like most of you, but this is my office. Actually, it has always been. I'm based in Madrid. Tech development is happening in South Africa, and we have people all over the world. So we were thinking, okay, good, we want to bring the team together. And the question we then immediately had is, okay, well, where do we meet? Very simple. But then actually, when we started to think about that, how would we approach that? We quickly realized that that question is actually not anymore, where do we meet? It's rather, where can we meet? And let me show you a bit how we have approached that planning here. So the first thing what we've done, well, we looked at the travel restrictions as a starting point. As I said earlier, previously, the whole world kind of was an option for us. Well, but now what are actually the places where we can effectively come together in person? Now, this is the example for someone coming from Spain. So that's, let's say, my example in that respect. And what we then did, we aggregated, we layered all the travel restrictions of the full team. And then the world looked like this. So already quite interesting. Again, there are some countries in Latin America, Africa, plenty of countries which we could go to. But then actually, there as well, I mean, some countries where potentially you would not consider having the meeting there because of risk reasons, like Congo or South Sudan, etc. So you would not potentially consider them in the first place. So basically what we've done here, we identified 17 markets which we would consider for our own in-person meeting. Then we said, okay, those 17 markets could potentially be an option for us to come together. So let's actually see how can we address this. So the first step then, what we've done on our side, was to actually look at the COVID-19 spread, but as well at potential quarantine. So the first thing then we pulled in the data, and when we looked at the COVID-19 spread, those are the infections per 1 million inhabitants, then we quickly saw like, okay, apparently Latin America seems to be a difficult place to go to. Europe actually, also my perception was that things in Europe are not looking too good. Well, it's kind of average in comparison to well, especially in comparison with Latin America. Then Asia, okay, Asia, we know that things are better there. Africa apparently seems to be a good place as well. There maybe the question is, okay, how much can we trust this data as well there? So then we said, okay, those are the infection rates, first data point to take into consideration. Then the next one is actually the quarantine. So we pulled in the quarantine information. Then we quickly saw like, okay, there are 4 markets which require us to go into a 14-day mandatory quarantine. Well, that's a hard no, basically. That's a hard factor. We cannot go somewhere where we have to apply quarantine. So if we bring these data points together, then we could very quickly, out of these 17 markets, we could actually very quickly remove a couple of them. So basically Bolivia, Brazil, because of the high COVID infections, and then China, Colombia, South Korea, and United Arab Emirates because of the quarantine requirement. And then we said, okay, what's next? Let's look at visa requirements, carbon footprint, and travel time. Then we said, okay, let's look at visas. Well, visas, we quickly saw, well, there are kind of 3 scenarios. And it's not a hard factor potentially, but still it would add up if some other factors as well are not positive, so to say. So we see there are a few countries where no visas are required for the team, so that's ideal. Then we see a couple of countries where basically our South African colleagues wouldn't need a visa, and then we see a Cambodia actually where all of us would need a visa. But again, not necessarily a hard requirement. It would depend on how our other data points looking like. As a next step, then we said, okay, let's look at carbon emission. We want to make sure that as well we are responsible in our travel. And then it was, quite interesting to see actually the massive variety in the impact on carbon footprint. The lowest there actually Italy, 25 tons, and the highest, well, it's blurred out already. Bolivia, Latin America, 56 tons there. So more than double basically. And so definitely very important to look at it. As well, quite interesting, the comparison, for example, between Kenya and Tanzania, neighboring countries. I mean, we have a lot of people coming from South Africa, so Africa can be an option. So there's a difference of 4 tons between the two markets as well. So quite interesting. This is as well mainly impacted because of whether you are traveling through a hub or not. So Kenya is quite a strong hub in Africa. Tanzania is less strong in that respect. And that as well reflects a bit on travel time, actually. So when we look at travel time, huge variety. And there actually you clearly see the impact of these hub cities. So UK, so London in that case, the fastest for all of us to come together. London, a massive hub. Italy as well, actually. Rome, quite a strong hub there. And Istanbul with Turkish Airlines as well, a big location. So you can quickly see how does that impact as well your plan. So if we kind of look again and we recap the first step, so we took out a couple of markets there. Now we add the additional data points here, and we can actually, based on these additional data points, remove a couple of other locations as well. And that's, for example, mainly here, if you look at Belarus, if we start from the top, the travel time is just remarkably higher than the other options we have in here. So basically, we remove Belarus, Bulgaria, and Cambodia because we have to be a bit as well, let's say, we have to think about how do we spend our time. And then Morocco as well, there the data points were not really convincing, neither Tanzania. And then we had Egypt, Kenya, and Ireland, where we said, like, well, okay, those could be potentially options. And Turkey and the UK as well as potential options, because the data points are not ideal, but still somewhere in range for our analysis. And then basically as the last step, I mean, what is still missing here, well, is actually the cost element. And that was, I mean, that's actually the interesting thing, how the approach has changed from a pre-COVID time where you would potentially start with cost because you had all the options. Now today it's potentially different, and especially after you've looked at travel restrictions and quarantine, etc. So now if you look at cost, that was quite interesting and quite a different variety. If we look at the remaining markets here, actually Egypt came up as the cheapest place for us to come together, and that includes travel cost and hotel cost. And then, okay, Kenya, remarkably more expensive, 60% roughly more expensive. And the other locations, well, 20-30% more expensive. So quickly then, how does that work? So if we now add the cost to this analysis, well, then we actually can quickly take as well here some let's say data-driven decisions here. And the way we look at it is that, okay, apparently Egypt could be an option because basically it's very cheap, it's the cheapest. The carbon footprint it's still okay. The travel time is a bit average, but okay, it's definitely relevant for us. Then we looked at Kenya, Ireland, and Italy, and there we felt that if you compare, for example, Kenya is just remarkably more expensive. So, and then as well, travel time and carbon footprint, it's difficult. So that's kind of was easy to remove it. But then if you look, for example, at Italy, well, Italy is 30% more expensive. 20 hours you could save for the team on the travel time. There we felt the cost kind of the additional cost doesn't give us too much time back in terms of travel. And that's why in the end we thought, okay, the United Kingdom, that could be kind of the other option. So it's remarkably, well, 30, almost 40% more expensive, but actually you would save a lot on the travel time. And that's then up to you to decide, basically, if we now visualize the data again. So what is now important for you? What do you want to, is it because maybe like us, we are startups, so cash is very important, so we have to look at cost? Or is it, well, because we value the time? And then in the end, if you look at this analysis between London and Cairo, well, the difference here is actually 36 euros per hour. So that's what it costs you if you would, let's say, go to Cairo, where the total cost is cheaper, but then you pay 36 euros per hour on every additional hour you would travel. So that's in essence what we do. So to recap that, basically, we are helping our customers to reduce costs on their meetings and events planning. We are kind of, if you are familiar with this term of the lowest logical airfare, we are helping you to find the lowest logical destination. We are reducing your planning time. We are reducing your risk by being able to pull all these data points in. And we are increasing your impact because a part of all these external data points we are pulling in, we're able to bring your company relevant data points in as well, which could be, for example, if you have certain key markets or key cities where you want to, or where you have customers. Well, if you have internal meetings or any type of meeting, why would you not consider having those meetings in those locations? Because you could create a higher impact for that meeting. So the return on value would be higher. We help you in your sustainability efforts because we can compare all the transport options and actually compare destinations around that, and potentially on productivity, just like in that last example, where we can tell you, well, maybe London looks more expensive, but actually it's remarkably faster. So that would potentially increase your productivity as well. So in a nutshell, and I'm coming to an end here, basically is we are helping you to really define the new way of planning meetings and events in this new normal we are living in. And we are not doing that alone. We are doing that together with our customers, with our partners. We are innovating together. And 2020 for us is an innovation year where we bring all these requirements into the technology and help these companies to get ready for meetings and events in a secure and in an optimal way. So thank you so much for listening to me. I don't know if you have any questions. Happy to open up the floor now. Here you see as well my contact details. So if you have any question, feel free to get in contact with me as well directly. Let me stop sharing some.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Yes. It's remarkable to see, compared to the month of January when you were in Belgium. And obviously we all agree and we all know that the world has changed, but you guys have adapted phenomenally well to that new environment, ecosystem in which we operate. And it's remarkable to see how fast that you were able to do so. So Thanks. Kudos to what you guys have achieved. I think it's absolutely great to see that evolution, and it was certainly very informative to myself, and I'm sure also to the other attendees. Any questions? So if you have, if there are any questions, and we just got one question in. So which data source is used to establish the air transport cost? Is that the GDS or is that another data source? Can you elaborate on that, Dennis?
Yes, yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks, Pascal, for your comment. And just before I go into the question, just quickly to add, we have, done this together with our partners. So really, that has always been our approach of since we are not from the industry, now we have people on the team which have the industry experience, but as founders, we are not from the industry. We've always worked very closely with our customers. We have listened and then basically brought that into the technology and then tested it together with our customers. So there's as well, thanks to our partners, we were able to actually, I think, well, not pivot, but to expand quickly now over the last couple of months. Now, regarding the question of the data source, it's a very common question. Where do we pull this data in? So these are transient rates. Those are live available transient rates right now. So what the first comment then what we get from our customers, okay, can we bring in the corporate rates? And that's actually a project we're working on now with travel management companies. So actually, together with our partners, we are looking as well, how can we actually bring everyone together? We don't do fulfillment. We don't book tickets whatsoever. We provide you the data so that you can take informed decisions. So then the question has always been, okay, how can we bring the TMC into this group, basically? How can we make the connection with the TMC? And there are some ongoing projects right now with a couple of TMCs where we see how can we bring then your data points into the analysis, but then as well help the user actually to use your existing partners, which you may have. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Any other questions for anyone on the call? We'll give it one more minute so you have the time to submit your questions. If there would be no questions, we'll be able to give you some time back this morning. And I don't think there are any more questions at this moment. So Dennis, thank you very much for your time and your participation to our webinar. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's the first one in a series of 8 that we will organize during the month of October. Watch out for the next invitations that we will circulate. Feel free to attend any of the other sessions. We have also recorded this session, so they will become available on our website for those people that weren't able to join us this morning, and for those who want to use this as a reference in the future. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and a big thank you to you, Dennis, for the very informative information and update you gave us this morning. Thank you. Have a pleasant day and stay healthy. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pascal. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, everyone.